Well, the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup is upon us, and it means very different things to very different people. I think for some clubs in Europe and some players in Europe, this is a little bit of a nothing tournament that is already a sort of pain in the butt and in a congested footballing calendar. For some South American clubs, this is a very important tournament that they tend to take very seriously. What about Africa? Well, I'll let you know coming up next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the African Football Report on the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your host, Maher Mezahi. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by africaasaCountry.com. Now, usually I'll plug an article on the Africa as a Country website. But this week, what I wanted to let you guys know is that we're going to be hosting the Africa as a Country Fest, the AIAC Fest in Nairobi, Kenya, during the last week of June. So if anybody out there listens to this podcast, is living in Kenya or in Nairobi, but anywhere in Kenya really, and you have a chance to make it out, I would love to meet you in person. It would be really cool if you guys could all come out and support. So we have a literary slam on June 23rd at the Alliance Française. We have a documentary screening of our documentary called After Oil on June 25th at a place called Unseen in Nairobi. And then finally, we're going to be launching our very first magazine issue, the physical magazine issue that all of you, if you're interested in, would be able to purchase on June 27th at the Mist in Nairobi. So if you guys are interested in any of that, please come out. We're also going to be doing a watch along of Mamelodi Sundowns versus Fluminense on this channel for the very first time. So that's if you're not like a diehard Mamelodi Sundowns fan, and where you're watching, the most minute aspects and the most minute details of the match, but you just want to sort of hang out with a bunch of people that are watching the match as well, then when I create the stream for the watch along, just reserve your place, and I'm going to bring on some members of the team to sort of hang out and talk about football. I think it's going to be a fun experience. But anyways, enough of that. Let's talk about the FIFA Club World Cup. There's been a lot written about the FIFA Club World Cup. And I would say that most of the coverage has been negative because most of the coverage is Eurocentric, right? And in Europe, I think I can understand why they don't want to play in this competition. You have to understand that most clubs, most fans, most players in Europe, they're going to get excited. They want to play against the best clubs in the world. The best clubs in the world are not necessarily going to be found at the Club World Cup. That would just be like this expanded version maybe of the European Champions League, interspersed with maybe one club from each of the continents. But this is a more diverse tournament, and as a result, for them to have it, at the end of the season where players are supposed to be resting, usually taking like a 2-month long break, I can understand. I can understand why there's a lot of fatigue. There's an oversaturation of the footballing calendar. I think even if we take out the Club World Cup, and everybody feels that. And so for me, these are fairly understandable reactions to the Club World Cup. FIFPro, the organizing body which sort of acts as a union for professional footballers around the world, they've released a few interesting studies about the Club World Cup. They, for example, first of all, they filed a complaint with the European Commission, the European Union, saying that players are not giving enough time to rest, and this goes against labor laws. But here are some statistics that they released that I'd like to read out to you guys, just to give you an idea about how much more football today's players are playing rather than back in the day. So when AC Milan striker Marco van Basten won his third Ballon d'Or, he played 3,228 minutes over 38 games for his club. And he played 7 more matches for the Netherlands. When Messi won his Ballon d'Or in 2016, he had lodged 5,062 minutes. So 5,000 versus 3,228, right? That was in 2014, 2015. He also had another 716 minutes playing for Argentina. So more matches for Argentina than Van Basten played at Holland. Kylian Mbappe versus Thierry Henry. By age 24, Real Madrid and France star Kylian Mbappe has played 2,952 minutes. So 27,000 minutes. To the 27,000 competitive minutes of senior level soccer. That's 48% more than Thierry Henry had at that age. Even though, of course, some of these statistics are out of context. Thierry Henry, I remember, was a little bit of a late bloomer. Really started playing first team football probably around 1920, where it was at Monaco, and then World Cup, and then Juventus. But I think the point still stands. Mbappe was playing at 16, 17, but the point still stands that today's players are playing a lot more football, particularly in Europe, than we did back in the day. Now, my problem with FIFA Pro is that they're directing this criticism strictly at FIFA. And the truth of the matter is, and everybody knows this, it's not just FIFA. Everybody's trying to pile on and sort of capitalize on the smallest minute window that they can find in the footballing calendar to throw in as many matches as they can. That's the real problem. And we saw it with Manchester United. Manchester United played their 38th and final match day of the Premier League season. I think it was against Aston Villa, if I'm not mistaken. The very next morning, they were on a long haul flight to go to Malaysia to play against ASEAN All-Stars. And the difference in time between the kickoff at Villa, or at Old Trafford versus Villa, and against ASEAN All-Stars in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia was 72 hours. A little bit less than that. So how can you go and strictly blame FIFA when clubs are doing the exact same thing, right? Now, the clubs might be a little more in sync and in tune of what they're asking of their players because, of course, they have, all kinds of metrics on player usage. They have these things. They're in the red zone. That means they play too much football. They're in the green zone. That means we can play them here. But nonetheless, whether it's FIFA, whether it's UEFA, whether it's the clubs, they're all trying to extract as much money as possible. And that's true. It can be a problem for players, but let's just make sure that we look at it from a holistic level, not just always blame FIFA because it's the easy thing to do. And I definitely don't want to take FIFA's defense, but I just find it a little bit hypocritical that they're solely focusing on FIFA. Now, what about in Africa? Are we having these conversations? The truth is no. And if you follow African football, if you're watching this channel, you know that mostly everybody's pretty excited for the FIFA Club World Cup. We have long seasons as well, especially if you're a club like Al Ahly that can, play 50, 60 matches. Sundowns, of course, they have the league. Then you have a bunch of clubs like the Nedbank, the MTNA playing in Africa as well. Those are long seasons, but those clubs have big squads. They use a lot of players. They can prioritize. For example, if you have a big Champions League match, maybe you're not going to play a player in the league because Sundowns, they can afford themselves that kind of luxury and that kind of they know that they're probably going to run away with the league, so they can take a game off, so to speak. Al Ahly can do the same thing, even though it was tighter this year with Pyramids FC. But still, we're not really talking about that, I think, because we're looking forward to playing against the world's best. This is the chance to play against the world's best. And as much as I personally love to watch the African Champions League more than the European Champions League, I think it's just always been an interesting thought experiment. How would Al Ahly or Mamelodi Sundowns or Esperance or Wydad do if they ever came up against Chelsea, Juventus, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid? We see it at the Club World Cup, and at the Club World Cup, Africa's done pretty well recently, mostly thanks to Al Ahly. But at the Club World Cup, you're playing against the European best, and the European best is always going to be massive, massive favorites. I always wonder, what if it wasn't the European best? What if it was a club like, let's say, Borussia Dortmund or a club like Juventus, who are not the Juventus of, 7, 8 years ago? So I think we're going to get a little bit of an answer over the coming weeks. One thing that I would like to actually mention is speaking of our success recently, because if you go by the Club World Cup, the previous version of it, which again was 7 to 10 days at the end of the yearly calendar, so in December, January, usually somewhere in the Middle East, the Europeans, I think they must have won 9 out of the last 10 competitions. But Africa, over the last 5, 6 years, we've been consistently finishing in third or fourth place, mostly in third place. So usually you have Europeans, South Americans, Africans. Not on some occasions the Asians would sneak into third place and would win fourth. But if you look at it like that, you have Europe, South America, Africa. Now, if you look at this 2025 Club World Cup, they've allocated 12 places to European clubs. They've given 6 places to South American clubs, 5 to North American clubs, and then 4 to African and Asian clubs. And I think that's just completely distorted. And it reminds me a lot of what happened at the FIFA World Cup, for much of the 20th century, where we'd have 1 or 2 places. Europe would have, again, 10. And then they would say, oh, how come an African nation has never won the World Cup? Well, you have more chips on the poker table. So, of course, you have a better chance of winning as well. So I think the amount of clubs that Africa has been sort of the amount of slots that Africa has been given for the Club World Cup is not fair for this specific one. We know why, because African or Asian clubs maybe aren't as marketable to a North American audience compared to South American or North American clubs, but and definitely European clubs as well. But at the same time, I think that's something that if I was the newly minted African Club Association or CAF, I would probably try to take up with FIFA to ensure that for the next Club World Cup, if there's a next Club World Cup, which is going to take place a year before the World Cup is held in Africa, we need to make sure that we have the second most amount of places at the Club World Cup, maybe behind the Europeans. So one of the reasons why it's not that this is sort of seen as has a positive reception, the Club World Cup in Africa, is because we get a chance to test our metal against the best. That's number one. Number two, the exposure. I don't think you can put a price on, you know, uh, the exposure that this is going to be giving some of these bigger brands in African football. Think about if you're Esperance or Al Ahly, right? Let's say Mamelodi Sundowns, and you're playing against Ulsan from Korea. You're going to have this young Korean kid that's maybe 11, 12 years old, living in Seoul or living somewhere else in Korea, flipping on the TV for the very first time in his life. Well, not for the first time in his life, but watching an African club maybe for the first time in his life, and realizing that there's a club called Esperance in Tunisia, and they're the best club in Tunisia, and that they wear yellow and red, and that they have, players from all over the continent. And that, you can't put a price on that kind of exposure. That used to be the case for the FIFA World Cup for much of the 20th century, but now with as much media as there is, as much exposure as there is, people don't really discover really new nations or new players at the FIFA World Cup unless, it's, very quote unquote obscure nations. Sorry to use a disrespectful language. But for the Club World Cup, I think there's so much discovery that needs to happen for a lot of these clubs in Africa, Asia, even South America, and even North America. That I think that kind of exposure is going to be great for African clubs as brands. And then, of course, there's the cash aspect of this all. It's been mentioned a lot on our continent, but if you just for participating in this competition, each club is going to be getting $9.5 million. You also get an additional $2 million per win. And then if you manage to win the tournament, if you're an African club, which would be a hell of an accomplishment, $40 million. Now, why is this important? Because how does this stack up? I think a lot of people, they say, okay, what does that mean for my club? Is that a lot of money for my club, or is it a little money for my club? $9.5 million to Arsenal FC might be nothing, or to Real Madrid. But what does it mean for Al Ahly, Wydad, Esperance, and Mamelodi Sundowns? The yearly budget for Al Ahly, by the way, which has grown exponentially, because I wrote about it in 2021, and they were at around $21 million per year. Last year, they're at $50 million per year, 2024. So you can see that Al Ahly are continuing to grow as a brand and as a business entity. $50 million is a yearly budget. So you get 1/5 of it just for participating in this tournament. Even if you lose all of your fixtures just for participating in this tournament, that's huge. That's a big chunk of the wage bill. That's can also be, all of your expenses in the CAF Champions League for 3 or 4 years. It's a big chunk of change. For Esperance de Tunis, their yearly budget this year was $16 million. So more than half of it they're going to be winning just for participating in the Club World Cup. Wydad Casablanca, I found figures from 3-4 years ago. They're at around $10 million. So they're going to be nearly doubling their budget just for participating in this tournament. And Mamelodi Sundowns, I haven't been able to find exact accurate figures, but I do believe they're somewhere between Esperance and Wydad, if I had to guesstimate. So you can see that why this means so much from a financial aspect to so many of these clubs. Now, one of the things that I think may be a little bit troubling is these clubs like Sundowns, biggest budget on the African continent, most successful club on the African continent, Mamelodi Sundowns, backed by the Motsepe family, one of the richest families in South Africa, billionaires. These are clubs that have dominated their local leagues. Esperance de Tunis as well. I believe, I forgot the statistic, but since the year 2000, or in 2025, they've won, I believe it was 17 or 18 league titles into the Tunisian league. So these are clubs. Wydad aside, the other three are clubs that have completely dominated their national championships, and now they're going to be getting $9.5 million, which would be sometimes that would that would completely like dwarf the yearly budgets of some of the other clubs in their league. It could be quadruple some of the yearly budgets of other clubs in the league. Is this going to create an unhealthy amount of stratification for these clubs? Will Al Ahly, because of this, turn into something else? I don't think so, because again, it's not a huge amount to add to their budget. But for a club like Wydad Casablanca, for a club like Esperance de Tunis, if they manage this money well, I think this can make a big deal. This can make a big difference. And in that sense, I just don't want us to sort of crystallize, like a top four or a top, let's say, 8 of clubs in African football. One of the things that I do like about the CAF Champions League, not so much these days, but at the turn of the century, was that we had a lot of variety in who was winning the competition. Nowadays, this, I think, is just confirmation of the trend that we've seen over the last decade or so, that this competition really is for a handful of clubs. And this is not going to help matters in that sense. Now, how will African teams actually do? Are these the 4 strongest African clubs that we have on the continent? I think everybody knows the answer to this. 3 of the clubs that are going probably deserve to go. And that's Al Ahly, Mamelodi Sundowns, Esperance, Wydad Casablanca. Based on the last 24 months, do not deserve to go to the Club World Cup. Yes, they won the Champions League 2 times, in recent history. But over the last 2 years, they've shown nothing to show to us that they deserve to be there. I think many, even Moroccans, would say that RS Berkane would probably be the better choice to go and represent Morocco and Africa at the Club World Cup. They've been much more consistent over the last 2 years. And the way they won the league and the CAF Confederation Cup this year was nothing short of impressive. I would even say, the CAF Champions League champions, Pyramids, would put in a better performance than Wydad would. Heck, even Orlando Pirates and AS FAR from Morocco as well. Even MC of Algiers from Algeria, I think all might do better than Wydad Casablanca. So it doesn't help that they're in a very difficult group, but these are not going to be the strongest 4 African clubs going to the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup. This will be at least 3 of Africa's 4 strongest clubs that are going to be in the United States. Now, going into this tournament, the clubs had different strategies. Wydad and Al Ahly sort of employed one strategy in terms of making themselves competitive. Esperance and Mamelodi Sundowns employed another. Wydad and Al Ahly went out and bought players, splashed out on signings, hoping that they could advance as far as they can in this tournament. And then it's one of those, it's almost like a gamble. If you sign this player for $2 million and he helps you get out of the group stages, or even helps you win one game, he reimburses his transfer fee. So Wydad brought in Nourdine Amrabat, long-time Moroccan international veteran, played for clubs like Watford, played in the Premier League, played all over the place. Dutch Moroccan, born in Holland, has played out there as well. Older brother of Sufyan Amrabat on Manchester United's books, or I don't know if he's still there, but I think he's on Fenerbahce right now. So Nourdine Amrabat can still do a job. I watched him play 30 minutes against Sevilla in a pre-tournament friendly. Mostly has played on the right wing over his career, and he's a winger that is really powerful and strong. I think he's lost a step on his pace, but he's still one of those players that he can just do this to you. He'll get his arm around you and protect the ball, and you can't take it off of him. And he can make that touchline his own. So Amrabat signs for Wydad. Stefan Aziz Ki, one of the most popular players in the CAF Champions League over these last few years, and of course in the CAF Confederation Cup as well. The Burkina Faso maestro, the Burkinabe midfielder, Stefan Aziz Master Key, as one Tanzanian commentator once called him, also joins Wydad. And of course, we know what he's going to add. He's going to add long-range shooting. He's going to add intelligent passing. And yeah, just overall intelligence to the game. He's a hell of a warrior, and I think he's a great signing for Wydad. And then finally, they signed a Syrian striker named Omar Someh, and he's 36 years old. He's an experienced striker. I think this is just a way for them to shore up their attacking line. He was in Saudi Arabia most recently, scored, I think, 11 goals in 16 matches in the Saudi Pro League. And yeah, just one of those strikers that's intelligent. Like Amrabat maybe doesn't have the pace that he used to, but still very physical and can knock in a few goals in front of goal. Good instincts, goal scoring instincts. Al Ahly, they brought in a bunch of players. Now, some of them they brought back in on loan players like Ali Ujiang, Ahmed Ramadan, Hamdi Fethi. These are players maybe that were loaned to clubs in the Middle East, and they've been brought back and integrated back into the Ahly squad. But they also went out and brought in Tunisian midfielder Mohamed Ben Ramadan, Mohamed Amin Ben Ramadan. Ben Ramadan is like a player that I believe he was at Ferencváros in Hungary, and he's a player that's very. I mean, we've watched him for Esperance in the CAF Champions League. He's a very good midfielder in that he almost always makes the right decision. He will very rarely misplace a pass or be caught out of possession. Kind of a tall, smooth midfielder, not really well known for like crunching tackles or crazy amount of interceptions, but he's just a good all-around box-to-box midfielder that can take penalty kicks, can take free kicks, and I think will add a lot of good depth to Al Ahly. They brought in Trezeguet from the Egyptian national team. He's probably been, in my opinion, the most clutch player of the Egyptian national team over the last 3 years. Whenever they need a goal, he's the one that scores it. So he's going to probably be playing on the left, and I think that's an upgrade on somebody like Hussein Shahat, for example. And then finally, the big splash signing, they bring in Zizou from Zamalek. And this is something I think we'd heard rumors about it over the last 6-7 months. And then it kind of died down. You think there's no. This guy, he's been playing for Zamalek for years and years and years. He's a legend at Zamalek. Is he going to go to Al Ahly? Of course, he's not the first player to do this. It happens fairly often that players go from Ahly to Zamalek or Zamalek to Ahly because the Egyptian league is a duopoly and there's only sometimes 1, 2, or 3 options. But man, I didn't think he would do it. He's sort of, I think, ruined his legacy at Zamalek, gone to Al Ahly. But to be fair to him, now he has a chance to play at the Club World Cup. And I think that in itself was probably one of the reasons why he made the move. But another player that starts for the Egyptian national team, takes free kicks, great with crossing the ball, can play on the wing, can play as a number 10. In French, they say has a big volume de jeu, means like he covers a lot of distance, covers a lot of ground, very generous with his efforts, a lot of experience. And I think Al Ahly fans are delighted to have him. So Al Ahly, basically, they brought in no less than 7 or 8 players for this. And you could see that they're really going for it. Esperance and Mamelodi Sundowns didn't really make any signings. Esperance signed a player named Younes Rashid, but I don't think he's been registered with the Club World Cup squad. Mamelodi Sundowns, I think they they even had to leave some of their senior players at home because their squad is so big. Now, for Sundowns, I think they have enough quality in their squad where they didn't really have to add anybody. They didn't have any huge gaping holes in that sense. Esperance did. Defensively, I don't know if Yassine Merih, their captain, has recovered enough from the knee ligament issue that he had at the beginning of the season. He's missed the entire season. You don't want him coming back and playing in this kind of intensity immediately. They, in my opinion, need a center half. They've been playing with Hamza Jalasi and Mohamed Amin Tougai. Tougai can do a job. Not my favorite defender, but Jalasi, I mean, has been probably the sole reason for some of the defensive mistakes that Esperance have made. Probably made from 5 to 10 really bad defensive mistakes over the last year or so. And he's going to be playing against Chelsea, like LAFC and Flamengo. It doesn't really bode well, in my opinion. So I think Esperance fans, they understand that they're pretty angry at their board. Like, they see what Wydad and Al Ahly did, and I think they felt like with just maybe 2 or 3 more players, Esperance could have had a really good shout to sort of go and do something in this tournament. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Now we're going to break each of these squads down and each of the clubs down in detail really over the next 1 or 2 days. But if I was to give a quick prediction about the group stages and see which clubs I think could make it out and which ones I'm not too confident about. Al Ahly have Inter Miami, Porto, and Palmeiras in their group. I think Al Ahly can get out of this group. Esperance have Chelsea, LAFC, and Flamengo in their group. Not too confident here. I think Chelsea and Flamengo. Wydad have Juventus, City, and Al Ain. I'm going to favor the Europeans here. And then finally, Fluminense, Dortmund, Ulsan, and Mamelodi Sundowns. I think Sundowns can make it out of the group. So I think it's fairly realistic to think that maybe we're going to have 2 African teams make it out of the group stages, Al Ahly and Mamelodi Sundowns. I'm a bit pessimistic for others. But yeah, we're going to go and break down team-by-team previews, what they need to do specifically against which clubs. And then, yeah, I'm flying out on Sunday. So Esperance versus Flamengo is you guys are gonna get in-person coverage from the United States then. So let's keep it locked in. Let's make sure we support all the African clubs at the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup. What's good for one African club is good for all African clubs here. So thank you for watching. Keep it locked in, and I'll speak to you all very, very soon. Peace.